Assalamu alaikum and hello everyone. I'm your host, Hena Zuberi. Welcome back to another episode of Justice for All Now on Muslim Network TV. On today's episode, we'll be discussing the Uyghur Genocide and commemorating the International Day of the Victims of Enforced Disappearances. Before we begin, let's take a moment to reflect on why this topic is so crucial today. We turn our focus to one of the most urgent human rights crises of our time, the ongoing genocide against the Uyghur people in occupied East Turkestan. Since 2017, over 1 million Uyghurs, at least, and other Muslim minorities have been forcefully detained in what the Chinese government calls, quote, re-education camps. These camps are not just detention centers. They are sites where Uyghur cultural and religious identities are systematically erased. Inside, detainees are subjected to forced indoctrination, physical abuse, and even torture. The scale of this atrocity is staggering, but so is the silence from much of the international community. Many countries are hesitant to confront China, a global superpower with significant economic influence. Yet, the evidence is overwhelming. Leaked documents, satellite imagery, and survivor testimony all point to a systematic campaign of cultural and physical genocide. As we observe the International Day of the Victims of Enforced Disappearances, it is vital to remember the countless Uyghur families who have been torn apart. Children are separated from their parents and placed in state-run orphanages where they are stripped of their heritage. The Chinese government has erased mosques, banned the Uyghur language, and destroyed entire neighborhoods, all in an attempt to assimilate the Uyghur population into a Han Chinese identity. The region of occupied East Turkestan is crucial to China's Belt and Road Initiative, a massive infrastructure project that aims to connect China with Europe and beyond. The suppression of the Uyghur people is part of China's strategy to secure this region for its economic ambitions. And despite the overwhelming evidence, the response from the broader international community remains limited. While the United States, Canada, and the European Union have imposed sanctions on Chinese officials responsible for these atrocities, the global response has been hampered by economic ties to China. But this is not just a political issue, it's a deeply human one. The stories of those who have escaped the camps and those who are still searching for their missing loved ones remind us that this crisis has a face, it has a voice, and it demands our attention. As we hear from our guests today, let's remember this is not just a tragedy, it's a call to action. We must amplify the voices of those who have been silenced and hold those responsible accountable. The world cannot afford to turn a blind eye to genocide wherever it is taking place. So today we are joined by two incredible advocates who have been at the forefront of this issue, fighting tirelessly to bring justice and relief to the Uyghur diaspora. Arslan Hidayet, Salam alaikum.
Walaikum assalam
And
wa
Rizwangul.
rahmatullahi.
Arslan Hidayet is the social media director and team lead at Justice for All Save Uyghur campaign. He's an Uyghur born in exile, an activist and an advocate of Uyghur rights. Before joining Justice for All, Arslan taught in schools and universities in Australia, Turkey, and Bahrain. Arslan has been invited to share his expertise about the Uyghurs' plight by giving live studio interviews and his insight on mainstream news media outlets like the BBC, The Guardian, Al Jazeera, CNN, and many others. And Rizwangul NurMuhammed is an Uyghur from Auckland, New Zealand. She completed her Master's of Public Administration, specializing in social policy at Cornell University in Ithaca, New York. She co founded Empower Communities Charitable Trust, which provides funds and training to address the employment and educational needs of the Uyghur diaspora in Turkey. Rizwangul is an avid advocate of her missing brother. So, inshallah, let's start this discussion. Arslan, I'll start with you. Can you share with our audience a brief overview of the current situation in East Turkestan and what has changed in the past year?
Very good introduction. Walaikum assalam, sister. Just mentioning the name East Turkestan in itself is a big deal these days because people seem to mention our colonial name instead. But you've pretty much summed it up before. We have concentration camps where Uyghurs are being detained for the most ridiculous of crimes, simply practicing their faith or simply expressing their culture. They end up in a concentration camp. And later on, if they quote unquote do not graduate from these concentration camps, they are disappeared, they are sentenced arbitrarily to 5, 10, 15, 20 years. It really is quite random. There is no court system, and within these concentration camps, there is abuse, there is physical abuse, there is torture, there is sexual abuse, there is brainwashing, there is indoctrination. And as you mentioned, the main reason why this is happening is because China wants a hegemony. They want one type of race. They want everyone to be Chinese. They want everyone to bow down and reject Islam and accept communism as their new religion and Xi Jinping as their God. And therefore, we have seen millions of people taken into these camps. Very recently, we have seen China open up a little bit where they are now offering 15-day visa-free visits into the region for people to show them that there is apparently nothing going on, and people are taking up these opportunities, sort of what we see in occupied Palestine, where people go and visit and say, "Oh, hey, look, there's no apartheid here, there's no genocide here." So whenever I try to liken what's happening with regards to the propaganda that takes place, I liken it to what's happening right now in occupied Palestine. And so we are urging people not to buy into Chinese propaganda and not to fall for their lies, because there are still millions locked up in either concentration camps or prisons, and we still have our family missing as well.
Mm. Now, enforced disappearances are a tactic that are used to instill fear and silence dissent. How prevalent is this practice amongst Uyghur families, and why do you think it is used so extensively?
It's tragically prevalent. It symbolizes the Chinese regime's multi-pronged approach to suppressing Uyghur voices abroad, as well as in East Turkestan. As you mentioned, this practice pretty much involves Uyghurs being secretly detained by state authorities without their families being informed of their whereabouts, their legal status, or their fate. These disappearances instill a pervasive sense of fear and uncertainty among Uyghurs, whether you're in East Turkestan or outside. See, when family members vanish without explanation, it creates a chilling effect, deterring others from engaging in any form of dissent, whether it's going to protests, speaking on online forums like this, interviewing, and simply saying, "Where's my mum? Where's my dad? Where's my brother? Where's my sister?" By making these individuals disappear, the Chinese regime disrupts familial and community structures. So we know that sons and daughters are separated from their parents from years on end. We know that children are taken off into state-run orphanages, and a lot of the times the parents themselves are in prison or concentration camps, and they cannot find where these people are. And then because of this, you have now a lack of activists, talking on this. You have activists, cultural figures, and those advocating for Uyghur rights. They're the primary targets.
Mm.
Disappearing these types of people silence vocal opposition and removes leaders who could organize or inspire resistance against Chinese policies. I don't know how much you want me to go into it, but I could go here all day. Yeah.
Yeah. Rizwangul, enforced disappearances have been a tragic reality for many families, including your own. Can you share the impact this has had on your family and how you cope with the uncertainty? Your brother is among the many Uyghurs who have been forcibly disappeared. And how do you keep hope alive?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for having me on this platform. My brother, Mevlan NurMuhammed, was arbitrarily detained in January 2017. And since then, he was placed in the police station first and then transferred to concentration camp and then transferred to the prison. There was a little bit of process over there. There was also a hope that he would be brought back home because the officials asked from my family mother to provide his clothes. So that was also the hope that he would come home. That was back in 2019, but it didn't happen. Again, he was sorry, put in prison and then sentenced for 9 years imprisonment for the crime which is called splitting the state. Again, as Arslan mentioned, that such cases where such sentences were decided by the Chinese authority without any trial, and my brother's case is only one of the millions of cases where our kinship, we were sisters and brothers, were detained arbitrarily and also put in prison for such a long period of time. Now, as time goes by, we know that why they were without trial put such a long sentence is that now they are most likely being in forced labor and also targeted for organ harvesting at any moment of given. And our brothers, these kinships, they were oppressed over there. They have been oppressed over there, and the force you asked that kept me going is that I would like to be the voice of the voiceless. Our kinship back home, forcefully detained, disappeared, tortured, targeted for organ harvesting, and they have rights over us. We are living in a free world, and we have to speak for them, stand for justice for them, and bring the justice and freedom for them. We are their hope, and we have to be hopeful, stay hopeful as well. Of course, there are a lot of obstacles in our way, but we stay hopeful and enforce our hope with actions.
So, on this International Day of Victims of Enforced Disappearances, what message do you want to convey to the international community and those who may be unaware of the scale of this crisis? I know you'll be heading to Geneva pretty soon to advocate for your brother, but what is the message that you want to send out?
So, as my understanding is that this day is created to draw attention to the fate of individuals that is arbitrarily detained, imprisoned, and it also gives the victim's family, like myself, the right to seek the truth, the information about our loved ones, disappeared ones like my brother. So this time I contacted the UN and got this chance to meet them in person. I would like to seek their continuous support in finding the truth about my brother, his whereabouts, his wellness, and most importantly, unconditionally and immediate release of my brother. And he should be given the freedom and the right to movement as well. So on this date, with remembrance of this date, I would like to, encourage Uyghur diaspora that, please keep going and keep putting effort in asking about your families. And this is, eventually, this is not at all as a domestic issue, like as China narrative says. This is about our rights, the Uyghur people's rights, international rights of human rights, and we have to keep putting effort in there. Of course, the way is long and slow, but I believe that as long as we keep, putting effort, we will get answer one day. This is very important. The procedure is very important.
Welcome back. Let's continue this discussion on the Uyghur genocide and the millions of people who have disappeared and their families don't know where they are and cannot be in touch. Now, Arslan, I'd like you to share you've been advocating for a long time for the Uyghur diaspora. Is there a particular story that you'd like to share that highlights the urgency and this crisis?
Sister, if you asked me this question a year ago, I would have been happy to share a lot of stories with you. But as I mentioned before, what's been happening is a lot of the people that used to come out and say, "Where's my mother? Where's my father? Where's my brother? Where's my sister?" um, are being approached and have been in contact with relevant apparatuses of the Chinese authorities, and they are being threatened not to speak up. Otherwise, more of their family members would end up in the camps or prisons. And so, therefore, I cannot publicly share this information anymore. As I mentioned before, a lot of the activists have disappeared because China has opened up certain realms of communication. And my message basically to the Chinese government is, and to everyone out there, is think about this. As Rizwangul was talking, let's just say hypothetically, our family members are guilty, right? What country doesn't allow, even if they are guilty, how come we don't know where they are? Or how come we cannot contact them? How come we are not allowed to know what their crime is? How come we cannot find them legal representation? And if they do say these are schools to educate Uyghurs, what sort of school is it that these students cannot get in touch with their loved ones?
Mhm.
And so this simply doesn't make sense. As you know, sister, we focus on the Chinese propaganda type on these things. We have Westerners living in China propagating that there is no genocide. And I would simply urge these propagandists to say, criticize the Chinese government in any way. Say one bad thing. They're not able to do it. They are not living in a free society. Us living in the United States or in the West, we can criticize and praise our leaders without any repercussions. So I urge people not to buy into Chinese propaganda. And unfortunately, we're now at a stage where China has opened up its borders a little bit and getting in touch with the Uyghurs, and therefore I am not able to share publicly, at least, these stories anymore.
And that's such a big challenge. This was a challenge 5-6 years ago when the genocide was coming into world stages, and it was hard for us to find people who were willing to talk about their stories, and because of what they were scared of what would happen to their family members over there. And then it almost came to a point of no return, where they felt, a lot of Uyghur activists in the diaspora felt like, if we don't speak up, we have nothing more left to lose. And so what I'm getting the sense is, now there is that, again, that hope that they might be reunited with their loved ones, and therefore they feel they have a lot to lose. So these are some key obstacles that I feel like people who are still vocal are facing in efforts to seek justice. But I know you yourself personally have relatives as well who are imprisoned. What obstacles have you faced in your efforts?
Yeah, well, very recently, after Eid, we have recently heard that my mother-in-law and my brother-in-law, who have been imprisoned for 7-8 years, have been released. My father-in-law and my youngest brother-in-law are still in prison. And yeah, we're able to contact them with off the phone of a Chinese police officer. And then again, you're put into a position where, do I continue advocating? What happens if I continue to advocate? Um, should I hold off? And there's always this challenge of whether or not you should continue. So we still have, regardless of this slight loosening of policies, we have a small population of Uyghur activists still willing to continue. And again, this has been because of the advocacy that there is, the world is putting pressure on China so that there is a slight loosening of policies that we are able to contact, even if it's just a little bit. But again, this is a long road, and Allah is choosing to test us in this manner. But we have decided to continue advocating for Uyghurs because there's still millions, just like with Sister Rizwangul and others. I'm mentioning only Sister Rizwangul because she's willing to be mentioned and she's still willing to come on and be the voice of the Uyghurs. And so, but a lot of Uyghurs have dropped off the race, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. No, Rizwangul, we applaud your strength and your resilience and your courage. This is not easy, and I cannot imagine being in your shoes. I cannot imagine making those decisions, because it is a very weighted decision that you have to make, that you saying something or not saying something, how does that impact your brother's case or in many of the cases that are under the Chinese government's radar. So my question to you, do you feel like these international days like this one have a significant impact on raising awareness and prompting actions, or do they risk being symbolic gestures without real follow-up?
So my answer to this is that, again, it is really depending on us Uyghurs. There are a lot of international days to remember vulnerable communities, arbitrarily detained personnel, things like that. But again, it is really depending on us to make good use of these days and these opportunities that raise Uyghur cause and also speak on behalf of our disappeared family members. I hope that there has been proactive actions from the international communities to contribute significantly in raising awareness on Uyghurs. But again, there is not much of it. But again, it depends on us Uyghurs, individuals, groups, communities, and advocacy groups to make good use of these times, to use these opportunities to speak on behalf of our kinship and raise awareness on this. Of course, there is risk involved in this. I understand that. I personally experienced that. I'm still experiencing. But nothing good comes without sacrifice. And for me personally, putting effort, knowing that there is a risk, is a way of healing, as well as feeling less guilty. From the day that my brother detained, and also seeing millions of our kinship has been oppressed in various unimaginable ways, I feel that I have that duty, not only moral, but also kinship duty to speak on behalf of them. Even if a little, individual capacity, I will keep doing this advocacy work, speak for them. It makes me feel that I'm finding the meaning of my life, feeling less guilty, because they are voiceless, they are oppressed. We know how it looks like, being under Chinese oppression. It was already so hard when we were there before 2017, but with this genocide now, it is even harder and impossible for them to speak, not alone acting, but also thinking. Their thoughts are also controlled. They are vulnerable. They can't be more vulnerable than that. Knowing that, and we are in a freedom world, having all these opportunities and chances to use, to be their voices, why don't we use that? That keeps me going. And of course, again, I mentioned that there is intimidation from Chinese authorities, like phone calls, this and that. But again, we keep doing it. I keep doing it. I mean, we have to be also take approaches to protect ourselves. For example, I changed my numbers. I don't use my phone. I don't tell my phone numbers for others. Just accept some few that I trust. So the intimidation phone calls from Chinese authorities now stopped. And another thing is that I carry emergency kind of kit with me. If there is something happens, I can use it and I get attention from people around us. Of course, we have to be careful, but again, nothing good happens, without sacrifice. These sacrifices, these risks deserves that I speak for my brother and our kinship back home. They really deserve
As
our
I was
effort.
listening to you, it is also your Islamic duty. This is keeping the ties of kinship is incumbent upon us. It's a commandment in the Quran.
Yes.
So what you are doing is an act of worship as well as activism or advocacy. And this is, subhanAllah, this is something that I think people forget. It is incumbent on us to advocate, to keep those bonds of kinship. So in your situation, what this is, may Allah grant you the highest maqam, all of you, for despite threats to your own lives and to the lives of your loved ones, you are keeping that advocacy going. Now, if you could directly speak to your brother, what would you want him to know? And how do you think he would want the world to respond to him?
I think I would cry first. But I would tell them that I love him and he's not alone. Of course, I mean, if I had any chance to speak to him, it would be always under the Chinese authorities monitor. So we can't tell much about them, but I would give him hope and love.
Arslan, what would you like to say?
I would say, well, I'm fortunate enough to not have, my direct family members, my mother, my father, my brothers. Alhamdulillah, they got out 40 odd years ago. But I do have extended family, and I would say I mean, it's very difficult to talk to them because you pose this question as if we would be able to actually give this message to them without being surveilled. And so if they were to get out alive, um, I would say, I don't know what I would say, because it's very difficult, because normally a lot of, for example, I will tell you something. At an event a while back, I was with a former concentration camp detainee, Sister Zumra Dawood, and a typical question came, and this was inside the mosque. A sister asks, "What kept you strong, or what du'a were you reflecting on?" And she was saying, "Well, we didn't have the capacity to make du'a because we were given pills and we were given injections, and it turned us into a zombie-like state." But if that question were to be asked to a Palestinian or Rohingya or anyone else, they still have that capacity to be able to make that dua or give that message out. So I have a difficult time explaining to people the situation on the ground, because it is that dire.
Yeah, I think, as you pose that question, is that like as if we have possibilities of doing that. We don't have it. Some Muslim brothers and sisters, even some other communities, they would ask me, why don't you guys bring your families back, outside, get them out, and why don't you just call and, or send money to them? It's impossible. It's like prison. It's like worse than prison over there, open prison. Of course, we have witnessed that, the Chinese nationalities, Hui nationalities, they are coming, go and they're coming, back from China. They even in New Zealand, for example, I know a couple of families, they brought their family members here. but they think that it's something similar can happen to Uyghurs. It's hard.
Mm.
It's hard.
The
It's so
closest thing
important.
I would bring it to is North Korea. Nothing goes in,
No, it's
nothing goes out,
impossible, I would
and
say.
then you get
Like
maybe
for me,
one
for example, if
person.
I, yeah, if I, yeah, I'm pretty sure if I return to China now, I would be disappeared at the airport.
Mm.
That's all.
Yes, the situation is absolutely different from any other country or any other situation in the world. And we're going to take a short break and come back and discuss what we can do. Welcome back. Let's go back to our discussion about the Uyghur Genocide. While both of you are here, I'd like to pose perhaps a difficult question. Many of our news feeds are consumed by the genocide in Gaza. And this is something that obviously the entire Ummah is absolutely focused on, and rightfully so. We have footage of killings and massacres and bombings taking place on a daily basis. Now, as Uyghur activists, when you see this, and especially let's talk about the elephant in the room. Many Zionists support Uyghur human rights, or we see, or countries like the United States go on to and sanction countries like China or other countries based on their human rights records. But we see that Israel isn't sanctioned, or in fact, we are supplying them with goods and with weapons. And on the other hand, in the Muslim world, China, which is occupying East Turkestan and committing a genocide, suddenly has this whitewashed image because they raised the Palestinian flag up. So it's a nexus of a lot of, and as Muslims and as people of faith, you both have been very vocal about your support for the Palestinian cause and suffered because of that as well. I wanted to give you both the space to be able to talk about this, to talk about how this is impacting your advocacy for Uyghur rights, how this is impacting the space within Muslim communities and within the Ummah. Please, Arslan, go ahead.
Yeah, so with regards to human rights advocacy, with me, I think values are important. And at the core of those values, just like justice for all, it is Islam. So my moral compass is based on Islam. And so when I'm advocating for whether it's Uyghurs or any other human beings, I base it on this. And so therefore, when we are advocating in the West, we are not just, unfortunately, human rights is just supposed to be about human rights, but it's become political. And therefore, in in the case of my situation, previously joining Justice for All, I was at an organization called Campaign for Uyghurs, funded by the US government and supported by Zionist groups. And I was simply comparing genocides. And at the end of it, long story short, I lost my job.
Mhm.
And so we urge people, activists, to be consistent, organizations to be consistent, and governments to be consistent. Because if you're not morally consistent, people are not going to listen to you. As you mentioned, the US is being complicit in genocide. And so the next day, when the United States talks about Uyghurs or advocates for any other group, they're going to go, what about this? How come you're not being morally consistent? It hurts the overall cause. Unfortunately, we are in a space, we are at a time where our Muslim majority governments, our big organizations, are not following the Quran and the Sunnah and sticking up for their brothers and sisters economically, militarily, or even voicing their concerns. At the very best, they're being silent at the very worst, they are being supportive of this. So I would call on people who call themselves Muslims or state leaders or anyone in positions of power to be morally consistent with the values of what you deem to hold true, which is your faith. Unfortunately, we're living in a times where, you know, hypocrisy, inconsistencies. We have, as you mentioned, Uyghur groups being backed by the West. We have Palestinian groups being backed by China. And now I'm hearing, you know, people think as if China is some sort of alternative to the current world order, and it is not. So I would urge people to be consistent in these matters.
Rizwangul, what are your thoughts?
What I would say is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives easiness within difficulties, and given the current situation where advocating for Uyghurs are becoming more challenging and difficult because of many reasons. For example, firstly, we don't have like images, videos coming out from back home on daily basis. Secondly, China has invested significant number of invested a lot in disinformation and misinformation, and telling, promoting their narratives of Uyghurs having happily life ever after. And another thing is that, as Arslan mentioned, that like the USA, for example, has been quite active in approving policies around Uyghurs, but because of his it is foreign policy in China as well as Middle East. Now the Muslim communities actually have been believing that Uyghur genocide is a narrative of USA. I personally heard that after I explained the situation, and they started believing in it. Just a recent example, for example, I asked Muslim brothers and sisters around me that what is the reason? Like I came from my own perspective. I asked them, what should we do as Uyghurs so you can give the similar support for Uyghurs as well? And they say, oh, isn't it like US narrative? How the genocide is happening there. We don't know information. We don't know updates. And then I told them through my personal story, and they start believing it. And for years we have been expecting the Uyghurs' name being mentioned in prayers, mosques, and even some like panels, for example, about genocide or human rights. We have been craving for that. But the one thing positive is that now people can start talking about it. For example, recently in a small halqa, Islamic talk for the Uyghur, for the Muslim sisters, one sister actually, she didn't know that I was Uyghur, but she did talk about one Uyghur man approached her and her family years back in doing Hajj, during the Hajj, and then he was surprised that he actually asked them, can you pray freely in New Zealand? That question really impacted them. She was telling this story, and then she was crying. I was crying for another reason, that I was happy that at least this individual is mentioning Uyghur name. So there is opportunity, and among the Muslim community to understand and know about Uyghurs and support them. Again, it depends on Uyghurs, individuals, communities, organizations, to reach out to them, tell them, especially in person, for example. In person is really more impactful than online. Most of the occasions that what I experienced.
We have a slight technical difficulty. The idea is so powerful too. People need to understand that genocide does not have to be piles of body parts and babies being killed on screen. This is not every genocide is like Rwanda or like Gaza. but the repercussions are the erasure of cultural heritage, of language, of economic opportunities, of bodily harm. All of this can happen in a manner like it is happening to the Uyghurs. And this is something that is absolutely crucial for people to understand, and really understand what the word genocide means. So, Arslan, how can our viewers contribute to the cause and support Uyghur human rights advocacy?
Very simply, if you're watching this from Justice for All, go to justiceforall.org or saveuyghur.org. Please donate $1. Number two, share the reports, share our findings, share any updates, share the news articles that we share on our platform. So make sure you are getting your notifications from Justice for All or Save Uyghur, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, X accounts. Talk about it in your khutbahs. I have a khutbah tomorrow that I'm giving. Invite us to your mosque. Hold khalaqas. If you're at an MSA, if you're a university student, make sure you talk to your deans. I mean, the Uyghur issue is not like the Palestinian issue. You're not going to be shut down by bringing up the Uyghurs. Your university, it's American or it's US policy, Canadian policy to bring up these issues. So you'll be supported. You'll be giving funding. Get in contact with us. We'll go there and we'll explain it in a professional and clear, concise manner.
Thank you so much for that. And Rizwangul, what can we do to amplify your voice and aside from praying for your reunification with your brother, what else can we do?
Yeah, I would second what Brother Arslan just suggested. Include Uyghurs in your platforms. The international community, Muslim communities, they should be, including Uyghurs to talk about this genocide. When we talk about like any other genocide, we should not exclude Uyghur, this name. We should include them. I can't emphasize that enough. Another thing is that, another way of supporting Uyghurs, for example, that the diaspora Uyghurs. Of course, at the moment, we can't deliver any projects, any support, financial or whatever, to our kinship back home. But in the Uyghur diaspora, the Uyghurs in diaspora have been overlooked. For example, in Turkey especially, we have significant population of Uyghurs who have been suddenly, most of them disconnected emotionally, economically from their families back home, especially youth, even some children, and the women. Those women especially have become the bread owners of their family without having, husband's support or extended family support. Their husbands have been detained and could not, of course, get out from there and join them in Turkey. So those women are struggling, kids are struggling, youth are struggling. We need funding to support them. That's why also one of the reasons that I set up this Empower Communities Charitable Trust. I don't mean to, I don't at all mean to promote my organization there, but what we are doing is that the value and the meaning and the purpose is behind. We would like to lift up these Uyghurs. They need support. We are already losing so much Uyghurs, our kinships back home. We cannot, afford to lose our our Uyghur kinships in diaspora. Some Uyghur youth already went on drugs. Some orphanages, they were being utilized in like different ways. We are losing our kids, youth, and women. And recently, the years of this grief have shown its impact on their health, for example. But again, here I would like to mention one thing that is important. We can't deny it, is that there are international collecting donations platforms. And I have also received like reports that, there are people, organizations are collecting in the name of Uyghurs, but these donations are not reaching to the Uyghurs. No. So we have to be careful when we donate, who we donate, where does this money go? Will it, this donation, my donation, will it really bring the impact? We need to look at that. We cannot like blindly donate and we don't know where does this money go. And this is the thing. This is also creating challenges for Uyghur diaspora itself. Like, sometimes people claim that, oh, I just donated and we are supporting the Uyghurs. But the Uyghurs are not receiving your donation. Where did the money go? This is a big disappointment, and like, it's really disadvantaging Uyghurs in the nonprofit nonprofit field. So I would like to bring attention here that whenever you donate to home, you have to really keep who is receiving the donation, which organization are they really delivering this your money to the Uyghurs? Are they really supporting it? Again, to summarize
That's
my
a very, very powerful, that's a very, very
we have
important point,
yeah.
very important point, because I've seen this as well, where people are fundraising for using the Uyghur name or using the Rohingya name, and the money is not reaching the people who absolutely need it. So any organizations, I know Rizwangul, your organization, any others that you would recommend that that the money gets to the people into their hands?
Of course, my organization, and we established in August 2021. Since then, we have been running projects that we benefit the Uyghur diaspora through economic empowerment and supporting the education as well as their well-being. We have run micro enterprises development projects. Now we are in the third round, and we Am I disconnected? Okay. Yeah, where we support Uyghur small businesses, not only through like a small micro loan, but also through learning how to develop business plan as well as yearly
Definitely, please support that organization. Any organization that you'd like to recommend, Brother Arslan?
I'd like to recommend this organization. You may have heard of it, Justice for All. Make sure you go to justiceforall.org, saveuyghur.org, and hit the donate button and to support our causes, because with this, we're able to do more thorough reports, we're able to stream more, we're able to post more, we're able to hold panels, we're able to hold events, further advocating for this, and we can also sponsor reports to be written.
Inshallah. Well, thank you for joining us on Justice for All Now. Today's discussion was on the Uyghur Genocide, the current situation, and the August 13th, the commemoration of the International Day of Enforced Disappearances. Thank you to our guests, Arslan Hidayet and Rizwangul NurMuhammed, for their advocacy and invaluable insights, and a special thanks to our producer, Asim Amin, and production assistant, Sara Karachiwala. Remember to stay informed, stay engaged, and continue advocating for justice. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum and peace be on you.